Salutations, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Podcast of Storm, where social awkward outcasts, crazy riddles, and all-around nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host and nerdy occultist, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Hello, everyone.
And I am your host, /Time Lord Wannabe, the brainstorm of pop culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I am doing okay. This week was mostly uneventful, which is especially good compared to last week. I had a lot of fun last week, but it tired me out something fierce, so it's good. In any event, today may be the day where we finally slay our white whale. Maybe.
Yep. Sorry, I was trying to get it to load. So, all right. Share screen. From tab. Yeah, so this is the Rewriting Ripley article. I can remember the full name of it is "In Plain Sight: White Supremacy, Misogyny, and Hatred targeted the Star Wars sequel trilogy." I think there's more, but I can't remember the full. It's a long-winded title.
And the short answer is no, it didn't. This title was a conspiratorial fucking falsehood, and it was a pseudo-intellectual diatribe of the highest order. But we've still spent more than 20 segments trying in vain to get to the bottom of this thing, and today might be the day. Might being the operative word.
All right, give me 1 second. Sorry, all right. So we stopped here. A section which is what we never learned from Gamergate.
What you never learned from Gamergate, my dear sir, is that the gamers were right and the game journos were wrong, and that you should listen to your goddamn customer base when they tell you shit. But instead of learning that very simple and basic lesson, you believe, with very scant, if any, evidence, that everyone who doesn't agree with your framework is immoral, and therefore you get to feel morally put out every time someone disagrees with you, especially when you try to co-opt their hobbies and interests, instead of actually learning the oldest and noblest lesson of capitalism, which is the customer is always right. Moving on.
Right. All right. It's very easy to roll your eyes and say that everything I've written here is overblown. These are simply movies. You pay your money, you have your opinion, and you go home. Rinse and repeat. But the reality is that we live in a world where a few very intelligent people are counting on you to think that way, and they will use that capacity to build the world that they want.
Sweetheart, that is not complacency. That is the aversion towards moralistic hysteria. This is the thing. You see it as normal to be in the witch hunter's mentality. You see it as normal to view your fellow human beings as subhuman, immoral monsters because they philosophically disagree with you over something. You see it as normal to view the average rank and file person who likes Star Wars or geekdom or geek culture or fill in the blank as some sort of crypto fascist because you would rather believe that there are demons around every corner and fascists are hiding under every rock than believe simply that you were wrong about something, or at the very least, that the philosophical views that you think are so very settled are not in fact settled at all. Because here's the thing. This entire diatribe of yours is an ego stroking exercise because it's entirely focused on you believing, again, with scant to no evidence, that you are the moral betters of the entire fan base of a given IP, and that you have the moral duty to be histrionically offended by every last thing because you, again, believe that there are demons around every corner and fascists hiding under every rock, in defiance of the reality, which is there are simply people who don't hold to the same philosophical framework as you and who value the art for its own sake above the art used as a socio-political or moral weapon. And this horrifies you to a degree that cannot scarcely be overstated. Moving on.
All right. That is what Steve Bannon knew in 2014, and 7 years later, because this was published in 2019, we are still being blindsided by the same strategy.
Sweetheart, again, it's not a strategy. It's people having a different philosophical framework than you, and you defining the simple act of having a different philosophical framework from you as the precursor to some sort of fascist apocalypse or something. Again, this is very much a factor of you wanting to be the moral superior of all of the people you define as your inferiors, and thereby convincing yourself that we live in a society with no trust, not even low trust. You essentially believe that we live in a society of no trust because, again, in the broader philosophical sense, you seem to believe that there are demons hiding around every corner and fascists hiding under every rock, when it simply is not the case. You simply can't cope with the fact that you can be certain of something, you can be morally certain of something, and still be wrong. End of discussion. Moving on.
All right. Just 7 years ago, again, this was written in 2019. It is to the next hiding tactic.
You broke up there, Brainstorm. You might
That
want to
the
say that over again.
Oh, sorry. This was never about Star Wars. Just as 7 years ago, it was never about video games. This plan of action will continue to move from one space to the next, hiding tactfully behind the illusion that these are just discontent fans voicing an opinion. And in each space, more and more people will be radicalized by the real existential threat that we are facing.
Okay, are you describing us, the people you don't like, or are you actually accurately describing the machinations of the movement we used to refer to as social justice that now gets referred to as woke? I prefer the descriptor of social justice because it's actually descriptive, but that's neither here nor there. My point, my dear friend, my dear conspiratorial fucker who wrote this article, whose name I cannot even begin to be arsed to remember, is for most of the fan bases of all these IPs, it actually is unironically and simplistically about the thing itself. We are not the ones who see art or culture as a political, sociological, and moral weapon. You guys do that. You guys see every IP as some sort of political or moral battleground. We did not beget that standard. Most of the anti-SJW or anti-social justice movement, especially back when this was written in like 2019 or so, were primarily focused on viewing the art as an end in itself. That has since changed because after 5 extra years of fighting a culture war, some of the anti-SJWs lost the plot just like the SJWs had. Cough, cough, Sargon and the Lotus Eaters, cough, cough. A lot of other people within the various minutiae of this movement. But at the time, in its original impetus, this actually was a group of geeks, a group of gamers, a group of nerds, a group of Star Wars fans, trying to tell to you they unironically do see value in the art in and of itself, and that they categorically don't want to see it used as a socio-political or moral battleground. But you people in your ivory tower, and yes, I am using the phrase you people, because I'm specifically referring to the academic theorists and philosophical fucktards who begot this particular vein of pseudo Frankfurt School nonsense, which is to say, the people who view art as a socio-political and moral means to an end, and who want to co-opt every facet of culture, every IP that they can get their hands on, which does include everything from gaming to Star Wars to Star Trek to Doctor Who to Dungeons and Dragons to every conceivable other thing. But see, the thing is, because you view art as a means to an end, and you view it as a means to an end so hard that you literally can't conceive of it being used in any other way, you can be faced with a group of fans who unironically see value in the IP for its own sake, at least primarily. And you can project all of this weaponization onto that group because to you, anyone who offers a contrary perspective than yours must be doing so as a socio-political or moral tactic, rather than a simple admonishment that politics, socio-political morality, and all other assorted academic woo has no place in these fan bases, because fans, being fans, view the thing itself, view the IP itself as valuable for its own sake, and don't need socio-political themes or morality or social justice as a justification for liking things. Your perspective is so anti-sincere that you can't even conceive of someone actually disagreeing with you on the grounds of wanting sincerity, i.e., to your mind, everyone who is not with you must be categorically against you, and thereby must be trying to weaponize socio-political moral rigmarole in the opposite direction as you. It simply doesn't occur to you that these people want no weaponization from their IPs. Moving on.
The pace our evolution is not equipped to handle. This means who can figure out how to exploit our inability to keep up with those advances will hold power that they never would have held otherwise. This is combined with a long, grueling history of sexism, and bigotry that we consistently fail to acknowledge and learn from as a society.
No, my dear, again, the thing you refuse to acknowledge is that someone might have a motive that isn't socio-political or moral weaponization. That someone might actually see intrinsic or at least intersubjective value in the IPs themselves. Again, the main crux of the issue here is that you are so anti-sincere, so anti the value of the thing is the thing itself, that you literally cannot conceive of anyone who sincerely believes that the value of a thing is the thing itself. In your mind, to oppose your perspective is to be in favor of the opposite of your perspective, or at least the opposite of what you think the opposite of your perspective would be. Which is to say that you're also very bad at diagnosing people's intentions or frameworks because you literally cannot see beyond your own. And it has so blinded you that someone can literally say, hello, I am a person who believes in the value of a thing in and of itself. And you can interpret that as, I want to oppose social justice in the name of fascism or right wingism or the alt right or some other such thing. It doesn't even it doesn't even occur to you that A, people can be in favor of the thing itself, or B, that the people who say that they're in favor of the thing itself might be being unironic when they say that. In your mind, the only reason why someone would claim to be in favor of the thing itself is to mask some deeper sociopolitical or moral power level of theirs. And that's just silly. You're so anti-sincere that you can't even begin to cope with the idea that some people might actually be sincere. Therein lies the problem. Moving on.
Mhm. These two factors alone create a perfect environment for where a minority of people can threaten the entire foundation of civilization, and the majority doesn't pay enough attention or doesn't care enough to notice. After a very near decline of democratic power in the most influential nation on earth, that sentence shouldn't sound extreme.
Again, are you describing the anti-social justice movement or are you describing the social justice movement? Because the anti-social justice movement isn't the one that engages in things like power mapping, isn't the one that engages in things like institutional capture, isn't the one that engages in things like co-opting of every given institution they can get their hands on. You guys are the ones that do that because you guys are the ones who view art as a means to an end almost exclusively. And what a large swath of the anti-social justice movement, especially in the year in which you wrote this, again, it's getting less true because people are getting more and more polarized, and some people who I would have expected better from have folded to Tradcon's stupidity. But at least at the time you were writing this, it is very obviously true, or it was very obviously true, that a large swath of the anti-social justice movement weren't trying to weren't trying to propose some contrary political gobbledygook. They were sincerely advocating for viewing art as a thing in itself rather than as a means to an end. But because you literally will not allow yourself to countenance the idea that such a thing could unironically exist, you have to view it as some sort of hidden tactic of theirs to oppose your political framework with the opposite of your political framework. Which again, you can't even accurately diagnose what the opposite of your framework would be because you're so convinced that your framework contains all of the good things and none of the bad things that you essentially end up strawmanning even those who are in active opposition to you in that political sense. But by the by, and I will stress this, especially during the time this was written, especially during the time when you would have been collecting evidence for this, large swaths of the anti-social justice movement were not a contrary political machination. They were an admonishment to view art as an end in itself rather than as a means to a socio-political or moral end. But you simply will not allow yourself to conceive of such a thing, either in general or in any sincere sense. Moving on.
The danger presented here is what the culture war embodies. It is a swift and effective pipeline to hate and extremism that creates a larger resistance against progressive political change. If enough resistance is built up within society against progressive change, then that change will be blocked from happening. If the rights and representation of underrepresented groups are kept from culture, so it follows that they will be kept from politics, and in the end, this is the goal.
What about my right to rebuke and admonish social justice for being a bunch of pseudo-intellectual gobbledygook? Because I am one of those minorities of which you spoke just now, and the one right that I want to take advantage of, that you would be absolutely anathema to me taking advantage of, is the right of individuation, the right of decollectivization, the right of disassociation from some sort of socio-political or moral hive mind that you appear to want to place me in. I claim the right to tell social justice to fuck off. And yet, that is the one thing that social justice will never allow those of us of minority persuasions to do. And by the way, you can be politically progressive without being in favor of representation theory, of social justice, of critical theory, or of the Frankfurt School. I am, and was, a Bernie Sanders supporting social democrat. And I remain at least in theory, Bernie Sanders supporting social democrat. But you know what else I am? I am also someone who believes in the principle that art should be valuable for its own sake, on its own terms, and intrinsically to itself, and therefore that socio-political and moral gobbledygook theming is at best tertiary and secondary to the actual meaning of a piece of artistic work, and that socio-political and moral representation is wrong, whether it be done by the TradCon family values brigade of yesteryear, or whether it be done by the alleged progressives. You do realize that you can even be a minority on the left and still not be in favor of social justice, just like you could in theory be a quote-unquote majority on the right and still not be in favor of TradCon family values, because there are libertarian right-leaning people, and there are also libertarian left-leaning people who want nothing to do with morally authoritarian ideologues or their ideologies, namely those of social justice. Please listen to me when I say that I, and many other minorities that you claim to speak on the behalf of, want no further right than the right of individuation. And this collectivization and this socio-politicalization of yours, this cultural representation of yours, seeks to rob us of the right of individuation. And it fucking pisses me off. Moving on.
Just because I want to apologize, Dragon Turtle. Well, because he posted this at 8:08. Sorry can't make it this stream, at least not live, but hope it goes well. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yep. Good luck, DT, with whatsoever you are working on.
I want to conclude this article with a quote Deadspin, written in October 20, included in an article titled "The Future of the Culture Wars is Here, and It's Gamergate." What made Gamer is that it's exploited the same basic loophole in the system that generations of social have. The preseated belief that you got to hear both sides, even when not presupposing that all truth lies at a fixed point exactly equidistant between two competing positions. The American press works under the assumption that anyone more respectable than, say, an avowed neo-Nazi is operating in something like good faith.
Again, no one is saying that the truth lies exactly dead in the middle. One thing I have been saying for the majority of this entire article, however, is you have to keep in mind there are actually 4 quadrants to the political compass. There is an authoritarian right, there is an authoritarian left, but there is also a libertarian right and libertarian left. If I am to be said to be advocating anything in this particular video, it is advocating that we stop listening to the authoritarians of any political persuasion. Namely, whether you be left or right or center or somewhere in between, I don't care what you advocate for so long as it isn't a morally authoritarian ideology. And the thing is, you are so convinced that your moralistically authoritarian ideology is correct, is the truth, quote unquote, that you are literally now advocating that you should never have to listen to or countenance any alternate perspectives. But the thing of it is, just because you refuse to listen to something, just because you refuse to listen to people of alternate perspectives than your own, does not prevent them from continuing to exist, you fucknut. No matter how much you want to ignore that there are any libertarians on the right, or that there are any libertarians on the left who thereby wouldn't be in favor of social justice, these people still will exist. And at least for now, it is still at least theoretically possible that libertarians on the right and libertarians on the left can agree to getting rid of the authoritarians on their respective sides. Because here's the thing, a right-leaning libertarian person and a left-leaning libertarian person can at least have enough in common that they would rather deal with each other than deal with moralistically authoritarian ideologues. Namely, the right-leaning libertarians can be opposed to TradCon family values and social justice, just like the left-leaning libertarians can be against both TradCon family values and social justice authoritarianism. The fact that you believe your ideology is so sacrosanct and so true that no perspective need be countenance other than it is not because people who want to hear from as many sides as possible have some sort of enlightened centrist appeal to moderation fallacy going. It's simply because you seem to believe, with no evidence, that your perspective is the only one that matters or should matter. And those of us of alternate perspectives are trying in vain to convince you that you are wrong at least about that. Because if you can admit that you're wrong at least about that, then we can at least continue to engage in the discussion, whereupon people of various sensible positions can at least explain to you that social justice is bunk, just like TradCon family values is largely bunk as well. Moving on.
Rest of the quote is, and this is why a loosely organized, lightly noticed collection of gamers operating from a playbook that was showing its age during Ronald Reagan's rise to power have been able to set the terms of debate in a $100 billion industry, even as they send women like Brianna Wu into hiding and show every sign that they intend to keep doing so until all their demands are met.
Again, people weren't opposed to Brianna Wu because she was part of the demographic of women. They opposed Brianna Wu because she was an ideologically driven feminist and because of who she was as an individual. And no amount of identitarian gobbledygook is going to excuse the fact that people are responsible for what they do as individuals. And I'm stressing the part of individuals because you seem to be unaware or at least unwilling to acknowledge that individual women are accountable for their individual perspectives, takes, and actions, just like an individual of any other demographic. An attack on a singular woman who does the wrong thing or thinks the wrong thing is not the same as attacking all women. An attack on a black man is not the same as attacking all black people everywhere, and so on and so on and so forth. People are individuals and therefore should be held accountable for what they do as individuals. End of discussion.
Okay. In the time since this article was written, this event has not only replicated itself across every part of pop culture, but it has been used to help elect a dangerous bigot and bring a country to the brink of civil war. If we choose once again not to pay attention in 7 years, where will we be? Okay, so this was 2019, so it's been 5 years.
Funnily enough, here we are 5 years in the future from where this from when this article was written, and nothing that he fearmongered about in this way has come to pass yet. Granted, there are still 2 years apparently on his counter, but I sincerely doubt that in the next 2 years it will look like the Boschian rendition of 1984 that he seems to think it will. I could be wrong, but hear me now, quote me later. I don't suspect that in the next 2 years everything will come crashing down and burning. And more to the point, you guys are the ones who brought politics into every waking sphere of culture. The only reason why anti-social justice has followed social justice into these various spheres is because social justice goes out of its way to try to power map, institutionally capture, and co-opt every IP, especially those within geekdom, and then those within that geekdom notice that their IP is being taken from them, and in order to oppose social justice, they find themselves in the anti-social justice category, whereupon they will be met by a bunch of people who have done this many times over by now, because social justice in turn has done this many times over by now, and so there's already a pre-established opposition for them. I.e., when the anti-social justice warriors within the Doctor Who fandom went looking for people who could agree with them, they found the people who had experience in things like Gamergate or the Fandom Menace or any of the other assorted factions, because social justice keeps co-opting different IPs, pissing off the fan base within those IPs. The fan bases within those particular IPs then have to go out of their way to oppose social justice to counteract their IPs being taken from them, and then the already existent anti-SJWs essentially find each other, and the group continues to grow organically. It wouldn't grow nearly as much, nearly as perfectly, or nearly as prolifically if social justice itself could be ours to stop co-opting shit. Because here's the thing, dear advocates of social justice, now termed wokeness, if you stopped treating every given cultural institution as a battleground, as a thing to be co-opted, subverted, and power mapped into oblivion, then the people who oppose you would have less ammunition with which to fight you. But you can't do that because it is your philosophical framework that necessitates institutional capture, necessitates power mapping, necessitates subversion of any given cultural institution. It goes back to Gramsci, who then goes back to the neo-Hegelians, who then goes back to Hegel himself. That's why I think that Hegel is at least indirectly responsible for all the evil of the 20th century. Moving on.
All right. Well, that was the end of that.
Okay, I'm going to get a drink because fucking hell, we did it, finally.
All right. I got water, so I'm finally finishing the rewriting Ripley article.
And I have. I'm only going to drink just a littlest tiny bit because it is absinthe, and absinthe, as Anna said in the Van Helsing movie, will knock you on your ass. But I do have a little tiny bit of absinthe.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, that's good.
Shall we move on?
Yes.
So don't send this to me. This is originally from thatparkplace.com. Written by John F. Trent, who I think has also done some work for Bounty in the Comics. This was published May 24th, 2024. Marvel's Wolverine Associative Narrative Director Mary Kinney says, every lever must be pulled to push disordered LGBTQ plus agenda.
Okay, I have more substantive things to say than this, but I'm never gonna get a chance to say this again. So, in the immortal words of Yzma, wrong lever. Okay, the meme has been served. I'm sorry. I had to. It was necessary. But yes, aside from that, obviously and very obviously being the wrong lever, one. I once again must point out how Orwellian it is that a executive narrative director is even a thing. Because again, in the world of every motherfucker who actually exists on the ground, these companies shouldn't need quote unquote narrative directors and all the Orwellian connotations that adheres to. They should have writers. When you need writing of stories or narratives, you get a writer. You do not get a narrative consultant, unless, of course, you are a postmodern Orwellian corporation. Cough, cough. But in addition, speaking as one of the LGBT, allegedly, I don't want any socio-political or moral agenda in any game whatsoever. I prefer if my IPs are unspoiled by political gobbledygook. Because, I'm of that good old-fashioned notion that IPs and stories and narratives and all the rest of it should be valued for their own sake and not as some sort of socio-political or moral means to an end. But then again, I guess I really am old-fashioned like that. Moving on.
Okay. Associate narrative director at Somniac Games, who is working on the upcoming Marvel's Wolverine game, Mary Kinney, declared that every lever must be pulled in order to push a disordered LGBTQ plus agenda. Speaking with about a recent GLAAD report bemoaning the lack of LGBT characters in video games, can you describe what's GLAAD? What's GLAAD? GLAAD.
Oh, it's just another gay acronym, essentially. It's the gay, lesbian, asexual, gay, lesbian, asexual, and I forget what the other A is for. But it's an interest group for the LGBT, allegedly. Again, I feel
Okay.
drastically underrepresented by these people because I would rather be represented as an individual, but eh.
She also stated the GLAD report tells us something key. Games for LGBTQ people to socialize, but it also tells us something heartbreaking that Q gamers don't feel that developers are thinking of them when they design games.
Yeah, and I don't feel any more represented by this gobbledygook. Because here's my thing. If I were interested in seeing gay representation, I would want to see it in a romantic context. And in order for gayness to be properly represented in a romantic context, you have to have individual characters that the audience can view as having a sentimental attachment to. Because here's the thing: the secret of romance stories, such as they are, is you're supposed to be able to be sympathetic to the person going through the romance subplot, i.e., we want to see Spider-Man and Mary Jane or Spider-Man and Gwen Stacy end up together because we care about them as individuals and we have a sentimental attachment to them. However, if you try this with gay characters who the audience doesn't have a sympathetic or sentimental attachment to, it will fall on its face, just like it will fall on its face if you try that with a heterosexual couple. If you don't give the audience a reason to care about about this character apart from their sexuality, then you're never going to be able to tell a meaningful romance story with them, because in romance stories in particular, that is when characters are the most emotionally vulnerable and sensitive. And if the character isn't well drawn enough to have a three-dimensional emotional life, or to um or to inspire a sentimental attachment in the audience, then it doesn't matter how gay you make the character if you don't make a character that is individually interesting enough for people to care about. And we have to care about them because, in theory at least, we want to see them succeed. We want to see them succeed, whether it be fighting the villain or whether it be finding their significant other. In order for these kind of stories to work, you have to have a sentimental attachment to the character, especially in a romance story, because it's focused explicitly on the character's emotional life, on their sentimental viewpoint. And if you can't make a character that's an interesting enough individual character to warrant a sentimental attachment, then any story you tell about that character will be a failure. Moving on.
Kinney added LGBTQ developers, and we want what players want. Designers that tell the player we're here, we're important, and we belong. In order to obtain players, we need to pull every lever we have: characters, community support, mechanics. How can you make gay mechanics in game?
I'm still focused on the fact that that's not what a good character should be saying. What a good character should be saying or implying to the reader is, I am an interesting individual that you can get sentimentally attached to. That's how it works. Like, this is how romance stories or stories in general have always worked. You want to have a character as an individual character who the audience can sympathetically attach themselves to, so that the audience gets to feel happy when the character succeeds, sad, frustrated, or angry when the character fails, and involved when the character has romantic feelings for another character. This is basic boy meets girl shit. And the standard doesn't change when you change it from boy meets girl to boy meets boy or girl meets girl. You still need an individual character that is sympathetic or relatable or interesting enough that the audience gets sentimentally attached to, so that we can then, as the audience, feel happy when the character succeeds at something they want to do, or sad/angry/frustrated when the character fails to do something they want to do. And again, if your character cannot successfully say in the subtext, I am an interesting character worth paying attention to, then it doesn't matter whatever else you add onto them. It's not going to make them interesting. And if the character isn't interesting or three-dimensional enough to have a internal life, so to speak, then no amount of bending the narrative into pretzels is going to make them interesting. Just like every other character throughout history, you should focus on making an interesting character first, a character the audience can get attached to sentimentally, and then consider whatever else about the character might be worth adding on. But you're going about it the other way, and as such, you're creating characters that at best annoy people, and at worst are just so bland that nobody even cares about them. And you wonder why this is a bad basis for a story mechanic. Moving on.
Right. All right. This is the opposite of what video game developers should be doing. Instead of attempting to normalize and lead people to objectively disordered lifestyles, they should be promoting the common good.
Okay, I don't fucking care about my society or my normative or my normative cultural society or any of that. Like, I disagree with the person who made this article now because they're being stupid in the opposite direction. The purpose of art is not to create some sort of social propaganda. Moreover, art doesn't even have the power to normalize shit, be it good, bad, or indifferent. What a game or storytelling apparatus should be doing is making characters that the audience can get sentimentally attached to, so that we can thrill with their successes and commiserate with their failures. Same thing with world building. The purpose of a world in a piece of fiction should not be to hammer the audience over the head with some form of messaging, or what's good for society, or derp. It should be to make a world interesting enough that the audience wants to engage with it. Anything else, be it good, bad, indifferent, or otherwise, is entirely secondary to, did you make an interesting world? Did you make compelling and sympathetic, or at least interesting characters? Did you make gameplay, in this case, that was engaging? Did you create a good sense of in-universe logic or in-universe mechanics? I don't give a shit about what society thinks about any given piece of art. I give a shit whether that art is any good. End of discussion. Moving on.
Right. The common good is some of the catechism. No,
Catechism.
Catechism.
Yes.
Catechism of the Catholic Church as the sum total of social conditions which allow people, either as groups or as individuals, to restore fulfillment more fully and more easily. Furthermore, Pope John Paul II detailed that the sum total of particular interest. What?
For the love of God, literally. Okay. I realize.
Hold on. Let me finish. All right. Furthermore, Pope John Paul II detailed that the common good is not simply the sum total of particular interest. Rather, it involves an assessment and integration of these interests on the basis of balanced hierarchy of values. Ultimately, it demands a correct understanding of the dignity and the rights of the person.
Okay. We appear to now be falling off two separate edges at once here. Fuck your unironically and seriously, fuck your common good. art has nothing to do with the common good, either negatively or affirmatively. Morality has no place in art in this way. I don't give a shit whether you're espousing fundamentalist Catholicism or whether you're espousing social justice. The issue is that you shouldn't be espousing anything of the kind through your art. Art's job is to be valuable for its own sake on its own terms, to have either intrinsic or at the very least intersubjective value. But that value is a qualitative value. It's not a moral value. And insisting on art suddenly catering to Catholic sensibilities is falling off the same ledge that the social justice fucktards just did. The purpose of art isn't morality or societal cohesion. The purpose of art is qualitative value, i.e., to be any good, not morally, but qualitatively. And the fact that you are now conflating being qualitatively good with being morally good means you are at least as much the problem as the social justice fucktard who calls herself a narrative consultant. Morality has no place in art. Quality, in theory, should have a place in art, not morality. Moving on.
Chris Kexor at Catholic.com explains the common good, in other words, is not simply what people happen to want, but what would be authentically good for people, social conditions that enable human flourishing.
And that is for them to decide as individuals, you cunts. It is not for society to project Orwellian nonsense onto them. And it doesn't make any difference to me that you think this particular variation on hashtag the greater good is better than the social justice definition of the greater good. Art doesn't correlate to the greater good. It is one of the things. Okay. Since we're already in the philosophical weeds, I'll get into the philosophical weeds. Generally speaking, in ethical philosophy, you have three categories of things. You have things which are immoral, which is to say things that are morally repugnant, morally bad, etc. You have things that are moral, or things that are, morally good, etc. But you also have a third category of things which are amoral, which means things that are neither morally good nor morally bad, because it simply makes no sense to project morality onto them or try to find morality in them. I'm a firm believer that art should be in that third category. Art should neither be morally good nor morally bad. Art should simply be focused on being qualitatively good or bad. And qualitative goodness is not now, nor has it ever been considered the same as moral goodness or badness. And trying to force your morality onto society or coerce society along your moral track with whatever you think art should be doing is just as bad, in my opinion, as the social justice warrior and their narrative consultant doing the same thing. Because, simply put, your moral grandstanding and your societal norms have no place in art. The only yardstick by which we should measure art is qualitative goodness, not moral goodness. And the second you start conflating qualitative goodness with moral goodness is the exact second you have lost the plot. Please fuck off. Stop trying to force something that should be non-moral or amoral into the moral categories of either morality or immorality. Please. Moving on.
LGBTQ agenda in video games is against the common good. The Catechism of the Catholic Church states, basing itself on sacred scripture, which presents homosexual acts as acts of grave depravity, tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. They are contrary to the natural law. They close the sexual act to the gift of life. They do not proceed from a genuine, effective, and sexual complementary. Under no circumstances can they be approved.
Okay, and again, that is, however it may be, which, by the way, fuck you. But and I'm gonna save up the Pinhead quote for once I get done with this. But the thing is, art doesn't belong in the realm of morality or in the realm of immorality. Art exists, or should exist, in the third category, in the category of amoral or non-moral stuff. Furthermore, since you insist on bringing morality into this, I'm going to now quote the Hell Priest, Pinhead. Do I look like somebody who cares what God thinks? Sorry. The meme was necessary. This kind of moral grandstanding pisses me off so thoroughly that I'm not even going to take it seriously. Even if there was any moral component to homosexuality, which there isn't, or even if there was even if there was a negative moral connotation to homosexuality, which there isn't, the discussion of morality or immorality has no place here, because what we should be discussing is the qualitative qualities of a piece of art, namely a video game. I don't want the ideological infiltration of social justice, or wokeness, but nor do I want the ideological infiltration of Catholic morals and standards. Art belongs in the third category, in the category of the amoral and the non-moral. It does not belong in the immoral category or in the moral category, unless and until it actually starts perpetrating the harm violating the harm principle, which is why, for example, child porn is a form of non-moral art, because it actually violates the harm principle somewhere. But the thing is, catechism or no freaking catechism, you cannot find a violation of the harm principle in adult homosexuality that is consensual. You can find a violation of the harm principle in non-consensual sex, i.e. sexual assault or rape. You can find immorality in the sex between people who are not of the age of reason yet, i.e., again, pedo shit. But you can't find a violation of the harm principle in two consenting adults who happen to be of the same sex engaging in sex together. There is none. And again, if your only argument is but my God says so, then I'm just going to default back to Pinhead's quote. I don't care what your God thinks. Your God can make an argument as to why something is good or bad, and I might be swayed by those arguments. But even if I was swayed by either of those arguments, this is not the proper venue to discuss them. This is the topic of a video game, and the correct response to criticizing a video game that is being ideologically co-opted is to evoke neutrality, to return the art to a state of moral neutral, not to use it as a cultural weapon of your own. And if all you can do in the face of somebody weaponizing a piece of art is to find a way to weaponize it yourself, then you can get fucked, because art doesn't have a moral component. At least not unless and until it violates the harm principle. Moving on.
As for transgender ideology, Archbishop Sample recalled the conversation he had with Pope Francis. He said, "This is a direct assault on God himself, rejection of God, that we don't need God, we don't need to accept God, we don't need to accept our individuality, we don't need to accept how God has made us, we just cast God aside and I will define myself."
Again, this kind of moral content has nothing to do with the topic at hand, so you can go fuck yourself. But as it happens, I do reject your God's offer, because whether you want to remember it in this particular moment or not, the relationship that those who follow the Abrahamic God have with the Abrahamic God is a covenant. It is, was, and always has been seen as a covenant. And a covenant is just another word for a bargain, a pact, or a transaction of ownership. I reject your God's covenant, and therefore I do not hold myself to your God's moral standards. But again, even if even if I were inclined to siding with you, this is a topic about art. Why are you bringing morality into it? I could see an argument for bringing morality into it if there was some kind of violation of John Stuart Mill's harm principle, and arguably forcing authoritarian moral ideologies into a piece of art does, in a sense, violate the harm principle. But your argument is not we should hold art to a morally neutral state, which is, in my opinion, the correct argument. Your argument is these people are weaponizing art in this way when art should be weaponized for our moral ends. And I don't agree. Art should not be weaponized for morality, period. The only time morality and art should be in the same topic is if actual harm principle violation is occurring. Moving on.
He later added, this ideology that's in the culture today now, that there's no such thing as a binary gender, there's multiple genders that we can define. Nobody's one or the other. We're just in this gender fluidity, so that young are indoctrinated into this ideology, and this is what Pope Francis goes off thing that's happening.
Again, all you're doing is deferring to your hierarchy's moral authority, which is, in my mind, no better and no worse than a social justice advocate deferring to somebody of the Frankfurt School mentality. Again, the point I'm making here is, what is the fundamental difference between you deferring to what some bishop thinks and the social justice advocate deferring to what some scientist or professor thinks? Namely, zero. The scientist fills the same function in her framework as the bishop serves in yours. And in neither case, ideological moral preoccupation or supplementing of a piece of art, or not the word I was looking for, subletting of a piece of art, is wrong regardless. I don't want art being used as a means to a socio-political or moral end. It doesn't make any difference to me whether the person trying to weaponize that art is of a social justice orientation or they are of a tradcon Christian orientation. In either case, I do not hold to the intellectual or moral authority of the scientists and professors that give social justice its backing, but nor do I particularly care what the Abrahamic God or his messengers think. You should not be making this moral argument. You should be advocating for art as a neutral ground for the exploration of all ideas. But you're not. Your only criticism of this person who is weaponizing her ideology in art is that you would rather she be weaponizing your ideology in this piece of art. And that is a meaningless argument. Your morality is no more or less sacred to you than hers is to her. I would just prefer that art not be a myopic source of morality, because societal influence is bunk. People create society. Society does not create people. End of discussion. Moving along.
Moving on. All right. No surprise that Kenny would want to promote these disordered lifestyles that under no circumstances can be approved. Given she attempted to gaslight readers while defending Sweet Baby Bash. In a 12-post thread to X, he attempted to justify and defend Sweet Baby Inc.'s pushing of woke ideology into video games. Some of you don't seem to understand how narrative consulting on games works, but don't worry, I do. Yes, this is about Sweet Baby Inc. because I've worked with that team and they're one of the.
Okay. I'm once again going to side with you at least a little bit here, because I agree. Narrative consultants and moral censoring of a piece of art is bad. The problem is that I apply this standard universally, and you seem to only apply it to people you don't like or frameworks you don't like. The thing of it is, at one time in the not so very long ago history, there was a push to use Christian values, quote unquote, this way. It was referred to as the Hays Code. It was basically an attempt to codify Christian morality or Christian ethics into art. It was categorically wrong and categorically made art worse. Just as bad and just as much worse as the ESG and DEI movement in corporations and academia makes art now. You may not like that I'm drawing a parallel between J. Thomas Bowdler, Jack Thompson, Frederick Wortham, and that ilk with people like Anita Sarkeesian or with movements like ESG and DEI, but they are effectively the same, just operating under different frameworks. My solution, my win state, is neither of these institutions get to hold sway over what art is or could be. You, however, my dear sir, want for there to be no ESG and DEI, but there to be something equivalent to the Hays Code. And I don't agree with you. I want neither of these bureaucratic, censorious pieces of moral authoritarian bilge to be dictating what art has the potential to be. You may say the Hays Code was only a response to the Red Scare, and to some extent that's true. And to some extent I would agree with you that communists shouldn't be unilaterally enforcing their ideology into movies or art pieces either. But the thing is, you using Catholic doctrine in the same way is wrong in the same way. The problem of communists or social justice warriors unilaterally enforcing their ideology into art isn't the thing that's being enforced, it's the unilateral enforcement itself. I don't want TradCon Family Values Hays Code nonsense, nor do I want social justice, ESG, and DEI bureaucratic nonsense either. I would prefer a world where neither ideology held sway. And therefore, despite the fact that I do disagree with ESG and DEI, and I do want it stricken from as many fields as it can be stricken from, I don't want it replaced with Catholicism or traditionalism or quote-unquote Christian values. I want art to be a neutral ground for the expression of all ideas, and let the meritocratic chips fall where they may, as far as to what the audience finds appealing. Moving on.
Kenny then shared a disingenuous breakdown of what Sweet Baby Inc. does by ex-user 8-Bit Closed Fist. He says, "Wokeness is killing gaming. Here we go. I have avoided the conversation around Sweet Baby Inc. for so long, but now it's getting out of hand. Basically, when a game is being made, some people will hire them to help them writing a dialogue or character design of certain types of characters. Spoiler alert, it usually involves stories and characters that isn't the default. He continued, now anti-woke people call it one of this and they flock to it like flies on a turd. They'll tell you they're the reason Kill the Justice League and Arkham Knight are bad games. They'll say they're the reason why Spider-Man is dating a deaf woman, why Joel lost in golf, why they can't edge to their favorite characters, and it all sounds ridiculous because from the bottom of my heart it is.
It's even more ridiculous given that it's actually what you're trying to do here. But again, this is the thing. I agree with the person who made this article,
John F.
Mr. Trent. Yeah,
Yep.
Mr. Trent. I agree with Mr. Trent that this is disingenuous, that this is overbearing, that this is authoritarian and moralistic. But in my humble opinion, heretic though I may be and am, is it would not be any better if Catholicism were the thing being enforced by fiat. No matter what authoritarian morality you want to enforce by fiat, it will never change or be any better because it will still be authoritarian and it will still be being enforced by fiat. I don't want any singular morality being enforced by fiat. I am a pluralist. I am a secularist, albeit a polytheistic one and an occultist. I want multiple ideas, multiple frameworks, multiple perspectives, multiple sentiments being the standard. I don't want a singular perspective enforced by fiat, whether it be left, right, center, or sideways. If it's authoritarian and moralistic, then it has no place in the public sphere. Fuck off with it. And if you try to judge me by the standards of your God, then I'm going to go full pinhead again. Moving on.
Alright. But they won't mention that they worked on games like God of War, Ragnarok, Alan Wake 2, because those are actually genuinely good games.
No, they're still worse than they otherwise would be, and they weren't all that good to begin with. See, that's the thing. When you prioritize morality over quality, you get what you pay for, which is to say, if you prioritize morality over quality, you get morality over quality.
Yeah, but I'm a.
And
Yeah, can
sorry, go ahead.
Well, God of War, Ragnarok, and Alan Wake 2, I never really heard anything about Sweet Baby Inc. I just heard how good the games were. That was it.
I heard that Ragnarok was the least good of all the God of War games, though, and I don't remember hearing anything in particular about Alan Wake. But point being,
To be fair, Dalton, they're not your kind of games, so you wouldn't pay attention to them.
well, I mean, God of War in theory probably should be because mythology and all that stuff. But regardless, back on point. When you prioritize quality or when you prioritize morality over quality, you get what you pay for, which means that you will get morality over quality, and as a result, what you get will be morally pure, depending on whichever perspective of morality you use, but it will also be shit. Because you've thought that by making something morally good, that would automatically make it qualitatively good. Well, unfortunately for you, although fortunately for all the rest of us who don't particularly care about authoritarian morality in our games, moral quality and qualitative quality are two separate things. You can make something that is both morally good and also of a good quality, but the key feature here is that you have to focus on quality first and morality second. But neither the dyed-in-the-wool social justice warrior nor the fundamentalist Catholic or fundamentalist Christian of any stripe can bring themselves to do that because they genuinely believe that their one morality is the only one morality that has any truth and therefore that it must be enforced by fiat from the top down, which inevitably results in shit all the way down. Moving along.
They won't tell you precisely what they worked on, what pieces of dialogue did they add or to what game, and how, because they don't know. It's not public knowledge. Some of the clowns are even going as far to say they are the reason for the layoffs, which makes no sense.
Well, if a narrative consultant firm becomes a what's the opposite of a badge of honor? Like, there's a word I was looking for, but I can't think of it. But if your association with a company of quote
Mark
unquote
of
narrative
shame.
consultants,
Mark of shame.
that's not the word I was looking for, but that'll have to do. Oh, now I remember. If your association with a group of narrative consultants, which by the way, again, is an Orwellian term in and of itself, because the average normie seeks writers when they want writing. They don't seek narrative consultants. Narrative consultancy is a bureaucratic nomenclature that only Orwellian fuckwits would use. But if your group of narrative consultants becomes a scarlet letter with which to brand anything they interact with, then yes, they are at least indirectly responsible for anything that they have contact with being essentially a leper in the abstract sense. So yeah, no, whether it was directly involved or not, if associating with a group of narrative consultants becomes a scarlet letter of doom, then you still have to get rid of them, because unfortunately, once the veil of ignorance has been lifted and everyone can see what this narrative consultancy firm does, they might communicate their displeasure by boycotting shit. Whereupon the companies in turn will go down in the financial ruin, and they'll have to lay people off. And they probably will start with the company that ruined them. Moving on.
If you are still confused as to why something like this would exist, let me break it down for you. Let's say I'm a young black gamer who lives in Los Angeles, so I start a service to say, yo, if you come up with a character or story that involves a young black gamer who lives in Los Angeles, you should talk to me about it because I kind of know what that's like.
Yeah, and it's a stupid idea because characters and stories should be individuated, not collectivized.
Hold on.
But
Hold on. Let me. So someone's created a movie and they say, "Yo, we have this character who is a young black gamer who lives in Los Angeles. What would he wear something like this in the winter?" I can then look at the character and say, add a little bit more drip here, add some drip there. Even though it's winter, we don't need a puff jacket. We're chilling," he said. They say, "All right, bet, move on." What the fuck?
oh god, the modern slang. Drip is essentially a shorthand for charisma, or riz, which essentially means the same thing. Um, and the bet thing essentially is like,
No,
oh
I
sure.
don't. I know modern slang. It was the way it is, the way it's written. It just sounds so.
Retarded.
Yeah, like the structure of the sentence doesn't work.
Yeah. Again, I've made no secret of my contempt for modern day slang.
I've used the modern day slang. I just in that it just doesn't sound right.
Because the person in question is trying to act in some kind of formal capacity, and yet their language is not in any way formalized. Probably.
Anything else to add?
Apart from the fact that that is cringe for all the reasons that we just went over, no, not really.
Or finally, he concluded, in fact, it helped us get more interesting. Oh, hold on, sorry. Second scenario, a show comes out. They say, "Oh, we got this character who's a young black gamer in Los Angeles." Would he say something like this? I say, we kind of overpronunciate our R's a little bit more, so it wouldn't be brother, it would be brother. Now, those movies, those shows, they come out. Some of them still might be trash. Some of them might be hits, but I did my job. The rest is up to them. That's essentially what Sweet Baby Inc. is. What Sweet Baby Inc. does. That is now way, shape, form, or fashion an issue with gaming, he asserted. Finally,
It is if they're operating under a socio-political or moral framework, like what used to be referred to as social justice and what is now referred to as wokeness. We prefer if we go back to calling it social justice because social justice is more descriptive, but that's neither here nor there. Point being, if you presuppose a socio-political or moral framework in your activism or in your advocacy, then that will be reflected in your character creation. And if the overbearing morality that you want to adhere to by means of this framework is in and of itself off-putting, then the end result would probably also be off-putting. Moving on.
sorry, stretching my legs a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Finally, he concluded, in fact, it helped us get more interesting. Better characters, or else every character in a video game would still be Aiden Pierce from Watch Dogs or Old Boy from Days Gone. Sorry, that shit is boring. Okay, clearly that motherfucker has not played Watch Dogs because that was an interesting story. It was personal. I didn't care that.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
I didn't care because I've played Watch Dogs. I like that game. Aiden Pierce was a dude going on a fucking revenge trip because at the end because he got someone he cared about killed because of his recklessness.
Mm-hmm. Furthermore, if that level of commentary is what you think makes a character interesting, then you are already a problem. Because because as Brainstormer just alluded to, what makes a character interesting, at least in theory, isn't their demographic information, it's who they are as an individual person, as an individual character. The problem with modern day narrative consultancy, apart from the fact that narrative consultants shouldn't exist because they should simply be writers, is one, if your description just now is in any way accurate, then their consultations are very superficial at best. And two, even assuming that your description just now is accurate, if you prioritize collective representation over character individuation, then your character is going to be boring regardless. Because as I just got through going over in the previous article, what draws people to a character is the character's individuality, the character's individual attributes. They're not supposed to be a surrogate for all people within a given demographic. And if you try to turn an individual character into a surrogate for all people within a given demographic, then whatever appeal they're going to have is going to be very broad and superficial at best, and leave scarcely little room for individuation of any kind. And a character who can't be individuated from another character is a boring character, especially if you don't let them go through formative shit in their story, which so many of these alleged narrative consultants seem to believe that if we show a character of a given demographic going through suffering or being evil or being morally complicated at all, that will result in the demographic they're representing being tarred with that same brush. And so therefore we can't have characters go through anything formative, ever be mistaken, ever have complex motives, or ever be individuated. Which again results in boring as fuck characters. Moving on.
Sorry, I disappeared there for a second.
Mm-hmm.
All right. After sharing this video, Kinney post. Oh, right. Video here from Asmon Gold TV, the woke gaming consulting firm that ruined all these games. After sharing this video, Kenny posted, it starts with dev team has an idea. Maybe they already have an outline of their story and a core gameplay loop. Maybe they've got a whole script and a playable build. Either way, something is missing. Could be a number of things. Continued, a character feels underbaked. Maybe a whole faction. The backstory of a map has weak sauce world building. No one on the team has time to do the research or brainstorming to make it cool.
Okay, well, okay. Even assuming that we're accurate, which it isn't, that's a disingenuous framing. But even assuming that we're accurate.
So hold on. I mean, I think we are well aware that there are like some serious, like terrible deadlines for certain development teams.
Well, okay, yeah, sure, but even assuming that's accurate, that's a problem of writing. That's something you need to get writers to fix, not narrative consultants. And you certainly can't patch, like, you certainly can't patch that kind of giant hole in a story, in a character, or in a world using social justice or representation. No amount of social justice or representation or critical theory or any of that gobbledygook will solve these kind of problems in a story, because that's not what social justice is for. That's not even what it desires to do. Social justice, as a general rule, desires to subvert narrative conventions, desires to break narrative rules, desires to undermine the intrinsic value of a story, which is a very bad basis for fixing a story. Because if your story is underdeveloped or half-baked or whatever the fuck, what you need more, and what Brainstorm and I have insisted on many, many times over, is the opportunity to do a fucking final draft or a secondary draft. Because so much of the problem of modern day writing is writers are, either through being forced by deadlines or through their own incompetence, forced to essentially draw or to publish their first draft, which necessarily is shit, especially if you enforce sociopolitical or moral gobbledygook in it. Because sociopolitics and morality take away from the intrinsic value or the isolated world building of the story. It doesn't add to it. So even if this were accurate, which it isn't, it's disingenuous, that would still be a problem of the writers that you would need writers to fix. Not narrative consultants, not moralists, not sociopolitical activists. If you have a problem with writing, you need writing to solve it, and you need to publish or to filter through multiple drafts instead of going with your first draft, possibly added on to by quote unquote narrative consultants. Moving on.
Okay. Maybe the dev team has gotten a ton of notes from publishers and execs on things that aren't working in the game. Kenny went on. Maybe the notes are all internal. The team knows something is wrong, but not how to identify or fix it. She added.
Okay, if they don't know what's wrong, or at least can't figure out what's wrong, then that means they're bad writers. Period. Like, because again, not to toot our own horns here or nothing, but Brainstormer and I meet once a week to talk about the various writing projects we have going. And usually the way it works is Brainstormer tells me about some new idea he has because the man's brain just simply will not stop generating new ideas. And I will ask logic based world building questions, or I will try to figure out where two separate parts of the idea fit together, where the missing material is. And between the two of us going back and forth like that for about an hour, we can usually take something that otherwise would be a one-off story and turn it into a deliriously overblown complex world, much to the chagrin of both of us most of the time. But my point in saying that was not to stroke our egos for being like great artists or some shit, for I genuinely believe we are not. My point in bringing that up is if two schmucks who aren't even paid the hundreds of thousands of dollars these writers are paid to do this shit can do this shit, then that therefore means, surely, that people who are paid, six-figure salaries to do this shit should be able to do this shit much more effectively, especially because they're allegedly professionals, and especially because Brainstormer and I usually operate alone. It's just usually the two of us bouncing ideas back and forth. But these people usually have a writer's room of like between 6 and 11 people. Like, like, two, it's a two-digit number of people who are allegedly professionally paid writers and professional writers to do this thing. And yet they can't be arsed, given the 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 of them, to do what me and Brainstormer do in an hour on any given Thursday. That is a sign that they are shit writers. Because if they either can't see where their story is going wrong or can't figure it out for themselves to the point that they need external help when there's 5 or 6 of them in the room to begin with, then they might just not be good at writing. In which case, force feeding morality and sociopolitics into the story isn't going to help it. It's like trying that, even if sociopolitics was a correct solution, that's like trying to fix the rupture in the Titanic's hull with a fucking band-aid. But as it happens, sociopolitics is not the correct answer and will in fact usually make the problem worse. So in short, it's like trying to fix the breach in the hull of the Titanic by poking more holes in it until it looks like a colander. Do you see how that doesn't help anything ever? And do you see how it probably indicates that either the writers or the narrative consultants are fucking morons in the first place? Ideologically driven morons at that, usually? Moving on.
Kenny then shared, wherever you are in development and wherever the notes are coming from, the problem is the same. Something's wrong and the team can't figure out how to fix it. That's when you call Sweet Baby.
And again, if they can't figure out how to fix it with a team of them, then I would hazard a guess that they're not all that good at their job. And moreover, if a company like Sweet Baby can't consistently improve the stories they're asked to improve, then that also means that they are shit at their job as well, even without the ideological gobbledygook getting in the way, which it usually and invariably does. So your problem is threefold. one, get better writers who can actually solve these problems themselves. Two, if you are going to use narrative consultants, use one with an actual proven track record for quality. And three, if you're going to do either of the above, don't allow them to bring sociopolitical and moral gobbledygook or ideological frameworks into it. This will inevitably bias your story, prioritize sociopolitical morality over intrinsic value, world building, logic, and characters, and will inevitably make the story worse. And a bad story will get a bad reaction, especially when we can tie these problems to one group of quote unquote narrative consultants.
Moving on.
Yes.
Next, she posted, the next part is key because some of you seem really confused. Narrative consultants do not get final say, and they don't override the core dev team and leads. It doesn't get into the game if we don't approve it, she emphasized.
But here's the thing. You don't need official capacity to force feed this issue. Because as the person who founded Tweet Baby said in that one video clip, if they can morally shame the company into doing something, they will, by means of using the same power mapping tactics that social justice warriors always use to infiltrate and subvert different institutions. I.e., if they can rain all sorts of social media hellfire on companies who don't take their advice into consideration, then it doesn't really matter if they're officially able to override them or not. If they can in the court of public opinion or in the mechanism of informal power that is moral shaming, then it doesn't really matter that they don't have an official capacity. If you can accomplish the same thing with informal power as other people can with formal power, then usually informal power will win out, especially when there's a moral component to it, which there almost invariably is with you people. Moving on.
Right. Kinney then stated that they consult. They do research, pitch ideas, give feedback, and maybe even write scripts. But none of that gets into the game unless the core dev team agrees with it. I'm going to keep saying that because it's key. Sweet Baby is not, nor is any consulting group coming in to wreck games, she claimed. They're helping smooth out plots and deepen characters. They ease the burden on the core narrative team. They're ADDITIVE. Additive in every way.
Okay, but here's the thing. 1, you're shit at it. 2, you're ideologically motivated. And 3, the dev team usually only brings people in to consult who they ideologically agree with anyway, and or can be morally shamed into being persuaded to using. Thus, you don't have to have formal power on paper to wield informal power off of paper. And again, even if you weren't using morally dubious means to get into this position in the first place, again, you are shit at your job, and your ideological biases also exacerbate the shittiness you are at your jobs. So if you're ideologically possessed and shit at your job, and often morally blackmail the people who allegedly oversee you into using you, then it doesn't matter how much formal power you have if you can burn the entire ship to the ground, so to speak, using informal power and using moral leverage instead of actual arguments. Which is to say nothing of the fact that these institutions have long since been co-opted, and therefore the dev team itself might be ideologically possessed, and therefore call you in out of ideological solidarity. No amount of dancing around the issue is going to make your ideological biases okay or make you any less shit at your jobs. End of discussion. Moving on.
Kenny continued, and if the dev team disagrees with them on something, the dev team doesn't take the note. It really is that simple, she wrote. So no, Sweet Baby did not kill your game. Of course, they had nothing to do with the layoffs. Duh. They gave notes, pitches, advice, and research. The studio made the final call on what went in the game. If you have beef, it's with us. Keep it with us.
And the narrative consultants morally shamed the companies into complying with as many of their edicts as they could, which is to say nothing of the fact that the narrative consultants were shit at their jobs to begin with. Whether it be through ideological possession or through simple incompetence, the narrative consultancy should not exist in the first place because these people are utterly superfluous at best and categorically shit at their jobs at worst. And no amount of using them will ever make your game actually better. Because either your writing team is so incompetent that they need external help in the first place, or the writing team is perfectly capable of doing shit by themselves, but they're morally press ganged into using alleged consultants because they don't want to get shamed into oblivion on places like Twitter, or what is now X. Moving on.
Alright. All of this was a giant lie, as Sweet Baby Inc. CEO Kim Belair admitted in 2019 that she and her company were opposed to diversifying a game with a Frenchman and advocated for a person of color character instead. During a presentation at the Game Developers Conference, she said, I once worked on a project where they had an all white cast where they expressed their desire, okay, we need to mix it up a bit. How about this character is like stereotypically French? So they have beret and they have like a striped shirt. I was like, okay, if you need to do that, can we at least make them a person of color? And they said, oh no, that would be weird. They're already French. So I want to do better than this, she asserted.
Again, this is a indication of ideological bias, and that the aforementioned diatribe was disingenuous, which, duh. But even in the best case scenario of everything that the first person said was true, that's still a sign that the devs themselves are shit at their jobs, and that the consultants they hired are also shit at their jobs. And far be it from me to be old-fashioned and shit here, but have you considered firing all the people who are shit at their jobs and hiring people who would be better at their jobs? So as to make, a better quality product and therefore hopefully appeal to consumers more? Question mark. Moving on.
The same presentation, Belair admitted that the company does indeed work to censor games through sensitivity reading. She said, we need sensitivity readers, we need risk assessment. And these are like, again, important services that I literally like list on every PDF that I send out to be like, hey, I can do risk assessment and sensitivity reading.
Okay. Just as a practical note here, no good story can operate under the auspices of trying to be overly sensitive to their readership or trying to be risk averse. Any story worth telling is going to risk something. And a story that is risk averse is also probably not going to make a positive impact, especially if it's been censored by sensitivity reading. A good story will inevitably make your audience have to risk something, because in order to be of an impact, it has to actually make an impact on people, which it does through showing them something they can't get elsewhere. No good story has ever been risk averse, period. If you try to make a story more risk averse or less risky, you're probably going to also remove anything meaningful or edgy from it, which is probably going to make the end result much more bland. And bland stories very rarely, if ever, stick with people's heads. Moving on.
And the silver bullet to Kenny's narrative is how Belair described working with video game developers in the Game Developers Conference. She said, if you're creative working in AAA, which I did for many years, put this stuff up to your higher ups. If they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
Yeah, again, moral blackmail through things like social media. Literally proof that they prioritize morality over storytelling quality. Moving on.
Mm. Because they have to consider, I say that out loud as a joke, but it's actually very, very true because if you start to consider that people who are player and audience facing and you have to deal with mitigating harm and with keeping the sentiment around their game and their project positive, there's like a genuine value that you could impress upon them both ethically and financially. You could say this is important, she said.
Okay, again, nobody gives a fuck about ethics in art. No one. Niet. Nil point. Unless it actually violates the harm principle, in which case, obviously, you. But nobody gives a shit about ethics in art. You can make a financial argument, because financial success is actually something that is important to people who create a product for a living. But nobody gives a shit about the ethical value of something in art. No one. Nil point, and nor should they. Quite frankly, it's absurd that the phrase ethical value in marketing is even a thing. Nobody should give a shit about morality. They should give a shit about the financial success of the product and the degree to which that product can appeal to the audience, i.e., also the artistic quality thereof. And incidentally, if you tried to make the financial argument to your betters, you would notice that every time, or very nearly every time, that social justice or ESG and DEI get forced into a piece, it is inevitably shit and financially fails. And if you were actually honest about the fact that it financially fails, the companies probably would crack wise and finally get rid of all of you. But you can't and don't make the financial argument usually. You make the ethical argument, and you terrify them into submission by saying that if you don't hire us, you're immoral. And you wonder why that also ends up going horribly wrong. Moving on.
All right. Belair elaborated. That's also a valid discussion to have because if you're working with a thin narrative budget and you work in AAA, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised or dismayed by the amount of money that marketing can give you. Mary Kinney has an evil agenda and she's willing to lie to spread it. What do you make of Kinney wanting to pull all the levers to push the LGBTQ plus agenda?
I think it's bullshit, but I think the Catholic equivalent would also be bullshit. I don't want myopic, unilateral, unidirectional moral lecturing in art, whether it be like the deepest tradcon family values nonsense or the most academic social justice nonsense. Morality should not be the focus of art. Quality should be the focus of art. And morality should be a distant second concern, if a concern at all. Moving on.
One second.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm setting it up.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the Umbrella Academy final season official teaser trailer.
I actually forgot they were making a final season, but I'm glad they are, because Umbrella Academy is awesome. I will say I like the first season the best of the bunch, but still, I'm happy to see a continuation of the story.
I think it's gone past the comics at this point, to my knowledge.
Yeah, they bottomed out last season.
Okay.
I can't see it. I'll have to jump out and jump back in. Now I'm back. Huzzah. And I can see it. I don't know of any. It's been a while since I watched Umbrella Academy. Like, food stuff with which to pause the thing. So I guess just banana.
Hello?
Hello.
Okay, I'm sorry. Things got weird for me for a second there.
Ah,
Can you see it?
okay. Yes. I don't
All right.
know of any Umbrella Academy related food stuff to use though.
Yeah, I got nothing.
I guess just banana.
Banana.
Like I feel like we should use something related to the donut shop from season 1, but I can't think of anything.
I got nothing, man. So let's just stick with banana.
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 Our world is changing. Has changed. There are some among us gifted with abilities far beyond the ordinary.
So Amir, this well, I final season also it does have that kind of melancholy feel to it, but like it looks kind of different.
I hope they get their powers back. I'm gonna be annoyed if they have to spend the whole season powerless. Or if they the other thing that would annoy me is if they power swapped. I fucking hate the power swap trope.
Why?
It's annoying because usually the power set is tailored to the character in some way, So when you make the powers swap, it's really freaking annoying.
But I was talking about visually, it looked kind of different. Like, I think they might be using a different camera or something.
Well, I mean, it has been how many years since the first season came out?
But even compared to the third season, which came out, what, last year?
Was it last year? I thought it was the year before. I could be wrong. I thought it was 2022.
Hold on. Okay, yeah, it was 2022. Okay.
Okay. I was gonna say I realize my sense of time might not be perfect, but I'm not usually that far wrong.
I'm saying it looks a little more. I know I use this word a lot, but just given all the gray blandness we had seen throughout, like, the latter half of the 2010s,
Mm-hmm.
cinematic. It.
Well,
I don't know.
I mean, last season literally did involve Reggie rebooting the whole universe. So if they were gonna do a like aesthetic overhaul of the show, it would make sense to do it now. Because I mean, he literally got into essentially the mainframe of the universe and rewrote shit.
All right, shall we?
Banana.
Banana.
I have adopted 6 such children. I give you the inaugural class of the Umbrella Academy.
And smile. No. We're back.
Yeah, again, just everything looks. I'm almost getting Doom Patrol vibes from, like, the cinematography, which is obviously a compliment.
Yeah, it's definitely not a bad act to follow. And again, if you wanted to do a aesthetic overhaul of the show, it would make sense to do it now because Reggie just got done rebooting the whole universe with a literal like, you know, alien technology mainframe nonsense thing. I still don't quite know what the fuck happened with that because it's not that way in the comics either.
I also just realized that Umbrella Academy and Doom Patrol are very similar shows in the fact that they star a bunch of dysfunctional superheroes.
You just now noticed that. I
Yeah.
think I might. Didn't I mention that to you way back in season 1?
I have no idea.
Anyway, I agree. Doom Patrol and Umbrella Academy are very similar. Of course, they have been this whole time, but I
Although
digress.
I will say, and no offense to Doom Patrol, I love Doom Patrol; it's awesome. But Umbrella Academy has a lot more superhero action in it.
Yeah. Also, it must be said that, like, obviously, you know, changes to the comics are always going to be at least somewhat annoying. I think Umbrella Academy, the show, is very good, though, at taking ideas from the comics and reworking them in a way that actually usually does make them better.
Mhm. Though, preferably, I would have liked some of the costumes and stuff from the comics.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, they got to cut the corners budget-wise somewhere.
I'm
And
just
they certainly couldn't avoid doing it with their powers. So
yeah, fair enough. Anyway, shall we?
banana.
Banana.
We're back. Out the way. Out the way. Out the way.
Get in!
I'm going in the front.
Everyone in!
Why are you yelling?
Shut up! First person back!
Hell yes! Let's go kill this bitch!
This is a rescue mission.
I'm still questioning. I'm still questioning whether they have their powers back or not, because the last season ended with the universe getting rebooted, and then Luther didn't have his ape physique anymore, and Five couldn't blink. So I'm curious whether they're actually going to address the powers or not. Please, no power swapping. If they're gonna, like, I would actually be more okay with them just not having powers than I would them power swapping. The power swapping isn't necessary. So either they give them their actual powers back, or just leave them powerless, I guess, for the final season.
Moving on.
Yep, banana.
Banana.
Right. You children bicker constantly.
Yeah, and we drive each other crazy. But when things go to hell,
I mean, Umbrella Academy has always been really, really good about using music. I love the music choices that they do. So, using the final countdown for the trailer to the final season makes perfect sense. Even if it is a little bit on the nose, like, it works. But banana. Otherwise, I suppose, unless you had anything.
No, it looks really good. Like, in a way, this kind of pisses me off because I wish Jupiter's Legacy was able to continue. So, just.
I mean, I do too. I mean, there's nothing saying we couldn't have gotten more Umbrella Academy and more Jupiter's Legacy.
Yeah. Anyway.
Banana.
Yeah. Well, they're there for me.
God, what a bunch of losers.
They have their powers.
Hooray. But that, of course, raises questions about when they get them back, because...
Which I'm sure they will answer in the show.
Hopefully it doesn't take too long. I could see a situation where they spend most of the season powerless and then they get them back at the last possible second, but I would prefer if they get them back relatively soon.
Alright.
Also, Five, the actor who plays Five, should have been the casting for Damian Wayne.
I've seen that, yeah.
Because, I mean...
He might be a little old now.
I mean, maybe, but then again, it was a stupid idea to start with Damian instead of Dick, Tim, or Jason, so DC has already kind of screwed themselves in that regard. I was wondering how they would handle the actor who plays Five going through puberty finally.
He's 20.
Seriously.
Yep.
He is one of those actors, I guess, who looks very, very young for his age. But yeah, I expect a lot of, oh, I have to go through puberty twice jokes because God damn it. that would really suck to live into your
Okay.
late 50s and then get zapped back to your 11-year-old self and have to go through puberty again. Yeah, banana.
Banana. August 8th.
I am looking forward to it.
I'm just setting up the next thing. So
Hmm.
okay. So this is something I personally want to talk about, just because, well, I've been following this YouTuber for about a year now, and seems like a cool dude. Xander Flicks, guy did was mainly originally he did like some Ben 10 stuff, like did a fan animated series called it was basically like Ben 10 but Logan.
Huh.
Um,
I assume by which you mean an older Ben.
Yeah.
An older washed up Ben.
well, I wouldn't say, I don't know about washed up, but yeah, an older Ben and stuff. It was a whole thing. Um, but he did discontinue making that for a few reasons. I think one was uh, technically he couldn't make any money off it because it was just a fan project,
Yeah,
and
copyright. I
it
assume.
took a lot of it took a lot of time and effort because it was just one guy working on it and stuff. Um, so he actually started making his own like superhero universe, which there are videos of that, and
Hmm.
but now he's officially making a Kickstarter for his own uh, comic called Cameraman. Uh, and I thought,
I appreciate the pun, if nothing else. I don't know anything about this project yet.
yeah, um, but like it's his first Kickstarter project that he's doing. The Kickstarter hasn't gone live yet, so that's why we're not checking out the site. Also, I'm having some weird problems with Kickstarter on my computer, so I'm not sure what's going on there. It might be the site itself, then I don't know. Um, but it's not. Yeah, but he released the trailer a few days ago, and I obviously, whenever we have a chance, we talk about like indie stuff to show our support because most of the time it goes unnoticed. So,
Hmm.
um, but it's like a minute and 22 seconds long. So I thought we should just give it a try. Yeah.
Yep.
The title of the video is "I made a filmmaking superhero cameraman #1 trailer."
Hmm.
All right, you can see it, right, Don?
Yes.
All right. Is there any food related to comics that we can?
Not to I was gonna go more in the film direction and say something like popcorn, maybe.
You know what? Actually, popcorn works. Popcorn works.
Okay.
All right,
So popcorn.
popcorn.
which I am now going to be craving for the next
The
half an
rise
hour,
of
probably.
artificial intelligence is killing cinema. Audiences are fed up. The box office confirms it. If we don't do something now, this industry will disappear forever. And how are you going to save it? A little movie magic. It's my vision to push the boundaries of what is possible.
Already, I'm hooked with like the premise of like.
I mean, obviously, it's kind of a humorous parody type concept.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna take an issue with the whole, framing AI as destroying everything, because I mean that's part of the joke. So I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna. But as a like again a humorous parody concept, that's interesting.
Also, I like the look of it because I think this is like the comic panels and stuff. Obviously, art style looks amazing.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Popcorn.
popcorn.
What is real and what is fiction? We will capture the birth of the next great superhero live.
Hey! Sorry I'm late.
Cameron Maddox, our new cameraman.
This is nothing like the cameras I had to use in film school.
That helmet is the ultimate synthesis between my vision and cutting-edge technology.
Okay. Again, I know it's a parody. I just want it known that the idea of the camera-based superhero literally being named Cameron is fucking genius.
I think that was the point. Yeah. Also, I dig because I remember hearing about this guy talk about this character before, but yeah. So the whole thing is like this Immortal Studios, which is what the production company is called. Basically goes to universes and films actual superhero stuff going on to make movies.
I mean, if this were a more serious setting, I would be complaining about the wasted potential there, but eh. But again, it's a parody, so the absurdity is excused on the grounds of humor. Kind of reminds me of Meldar from the one Jimmy Neutron like game show parody movie. Or am I the only one that remembers that existed?
What?
I said it reminds me a little bit of Meldar from the Jimmy Neutron game show parody movie.
But yeah, I just find that
take it from your expression. I'm the only one that remembers that existed.
it's been a long time since I've watched Jimmy Neutron. But again, I just find it really. It's just a really neat concept. It's not like because I myself have studied and tried to do filmmaking in the past, so this kind of character really speaks to me.
I think I'm coming at it from the opposite direction, where I think it's a little bit on the nose, even for parody. But I'm not gonna shit on it. It's like I say, it's a parody. It's obviously trying to be like over the top and absurd for the lulz. So I'm not gonna.
I don't think I think you're looking at it from a really weird direction. Because I'm not getting parody, to be honest. Well, not parody, but
Well, like I say, either it's a parody, in which case the absurdity is excused, or I actually have to start taking it seriously, which is going to result in me shitting on it. So I'm not going to shit on it. A parody, it remains.
Is that really just your two modes?
Like those are basically the only two options with this setup. Either I can excuse it on the grounds of parody, in which case I'm not going to shit on it, or I actually have to start using my brain, at which point it's probably going to end up getting shit on, and I don't want to shit on it. So I'm going to have to I'm going to have to keep reminding myself that it's parody, and therefore not to question the on the nose bullshit of the setup.
Most superhero shit is on the nose.
Not since the Silver Age.
Okay, well, we're not gonna do this. We're not.
Again, this is why I'm excusing it on the grounds of parody, because it's either that or my brain switches on and then I have to shit on it. So I'm not gonna do it.
I keep forgetting that you always say that you're the asshole.
Again, it's not as though that wasn't like literally the first thing about myself that I told you. So you can't even say you weren't effectively warned, because I've been warning you since literally I think the day we met.
I do want to say I'm kind of getting some. I don't know if you agree with me, but art style wise, or like the coloring or whatever, somewhat Jack Kirby. A bit.
Maybe not Jack Kirby. I'm getting more Roy Thomas.
Give me I know who you're talking about, but I can't remember what he's done.
He was big in the 70s as well. The thing I know him the most from is his Elric of Melpomene adaptation. But he also was in Doctor Strange for a little while in the 70s.
I'm looking him up real.
Involved with.
I'm looking him up real quick. Okay. Okay. All right. Shall we popcorn?
We shall popcorn.
This is amazing.
You'll have to be faster, stronger, ready for anything. Oh, and don't break the suit.
Come on, Cam. You can do this.
Now, let's make history. Lights, camera, action.
Here goes nothing.
But it's interesting that Cameraman is technically a superhero that is both never remembered and never seen, technically, because he's the one that we're seeing the movie through, right?
I'm not sure exactly what his powers are supposed to be, but then again, I'm not sure I'm supposed to ask that question because, again, parody.
One trailer. So that is actually a good question.
I assume it's Iron, like pseudo Iron Man-ish type shit. I'm betting probably with a little bit of Mysterio thrown in, because again, movie magic type shit. But who knows? And again, I'm trying my damnedest to ask as few questions as possible because parody.
Honestly, Don, I'm gonna be honest. I don't think this comic is for you.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
But in any case, I am going to remain blissfully not analyzing this on the grounds of parody, because that would be a fool's errand to like seriously analyze parody.
Okay. Popcorn?
Popcorn.
Here goes nothing. Didn't this look so much easier in the movies? Blue Star hits theaters this summer. Director Warwick, what can we expect from your bold take on the superhero genre?
When the time comes, you won't even believe your eyes.
I will say, yeah, it does seem more like a parody of like the filmmaking industry and stuff, which I'm fine with, given how kind of far it's fallen relatively recently.
I mean, yeah, and I think it's a little, again, I think might be a little bit on the nose, but
okay, if it's a parody, when isn't parody on the nose?
I mean, there are degrees. There, you can be a little bit more subtle with it and less on the nose. But like I say, I'm trying not to analyze it very much because only an idiot takes parody 100% seriously. Still don't think it's quite as funny as it thinks it is, but then again, that might just be the trailer.
With that, folks, I want to say goodbye. Adios, aloha, avidazai, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Shalom and fuck off.